24.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call, please.
Alderman Hoffman.
Here.
Alderman Barella. Alderman Rucker.
Here.
Alderman Ross.
Here.
Alderman Morose.
Here.
Alderman Osteen.
I was trying to slow down.
I know, I was getting there. I saw that. Mayor Hermanson.
Here. All right, this is a special meeting, so we have no unfinished business, no new business. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. This is city code changes to design guidelines related to the water and sewage system, storm drainage and road cut, utility trench, and excavation permit. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant City Administrator Mike Welty, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. We have been working on updating these for a few years. A lot of what you see in front of you is a lot of housekeeping, a lot of just updating our standards to the current standards that are done today in the construction industry. In the course of what we have done, we have consulted with the building department. Obviously, Zach and Nathan here across from me have been heavily involved in this, along with our water department. Several engineering firms in town have also been consulted. But at the end of the day, I had reached out to the mayor and Gina, and I had said, I really think it's in our best interest to have a public forum and kind of go through this stuff and make sure that any other citizen or any other contractor that has any questions has the opportunity to kind of have them answered here. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and Dave's going to kind of summarize everything before we open it up for public comment. And then I did receive some additional questions earlier today from Alderman Ross, and we are prepared to address those in the discussion section of the agenda tonight, sir. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dave.
All right, thanks, Mike. As Mike said, I do feel like a lot of the changes that are before you tonight are more on the administrative side and just getting up to current standards. I will just take a few minutes and hit some of the bigger changes that are proposed in these revisions. And I'm starting off in the Section 2 water system. On page 8 of 18, at the top of that page, you will see that we have revised the minimum water main size to 6-inch diameter, previously read 4. Just with the growth that you've seen in the city and the fire protection requirements within the city, that just feels appropriate to increase that minimum water main size to 6-inch diameter.
Whereabouts are you, Dave?
There's 3 different page systems in this document.
Okay.
So just tell us which system you're using.
I'm using the bottom center where it says 8 of 18.
Page 9 of the packet.
Okay.
Page 9 of the packet.
Well, of the packet, it's page
9.
14.
Oh, or it's 14 too.
The bottom right-hand corner will be
See,
page 9.
14 over there.
In the middle will be page
9
4 of
there,
102, and above that's page 3 of 18. So the bottom right-hand corner is page 9 of 19, and maybe we can just refer to that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do my best here. I think I have my notes on a
Dave may not have the packet.
Did you say 14?
separate here, so maybe I'll see if I can do this in conjunction with Mike and get everybody steered to the correct page.
But in the corner, it's page 14 of 119.
Let's see where we are.
Why are they doing that? Oh, okay.
All right, I think we're all there now, over here. This side's good now.
Okay.
So we're going to be on page 20.
Okay, so on page 20 under D, installation of meter assemblies. One new change here is that moving forward, service lines will be tapped onto the new main by city staff. on small diameter service lines. Anything over 2 inches will still be performed by an approved contractor and witnessed by the city. So that is a little bit of a change as to how things are currently being performed.
A little louder if you could, Dave, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. And then moving on to 17 of 18.
This is ridiculous.
So we're going to be on page 23
Of which,
of the packet? Of the packet.
okay.
I'm always referring to the packet page number.
Very good.
Bottom right-hand corner.
There you go.
And all you see here is this is just formalizing something that's already being done. This is just including water sampling requirements for new construction into the city design guidelines. So this essentially just mimics what DNR requires and what's currently being done in the city, just formalizing this into your design guidelines. Those were all of the items I had to note in the water system. Moving on to the sewer system. On the first sheet of the Section 3 sewer system, you'll see the second paragraph, there's
What
several
page we on,
revisions.
Dave? I'm sorry.
Hang on.
38 possibly?
38, I think.
Yep.
All right. Everybody there? Okay. Thank you.
On page 38, that second paragraph, this is something new the city's doing to try to deal with some issues we were having with lead times on certain types of equipment. So the city's going to have maintain an inventory of grinder stations that can be purchased by developers or individuals who are in need of a grinder station. The goal here is that this will eliminate the situation where someone is required to get a certain type of station and there's a long lead item on that station. Now the city will have a few in their yard, and if they're not able to purchase it directly from the supplier, they can purchase it from the city. So trying to eliminate some supply chain issues that we were having. On the very next page, you'll see there's a lot of information removed from this. This, rather than trying to dictate what are essentially DNR standards, we've simplified this and just said that any design will need to follow DNR requirements. All this table was doing was mimicking what was in the DNR design guideline, and that changes from time to time. So we want to stay current with DNR, so we're just referencing the DNR standard. On the next page, Mike, 3 of 14.
Page 40.
Yes, in the lower sections there under gravity sewers, number 2, gravity sewer mains. This is just a cleanup. There was some pipe materials that would not be used for gravity sewer construction, and we just eliminated those standards from this section. So again, just more or less a cleanup item there. Go to this one, Mike, 8 of 14.
We're on page 45 now.
In the top section under number 12, tapping saddle, this is very similar to what we talked about on the water side. So when we're tapping pressure sewers, the small taps will be performed by city staff, and the taps over 2 inches will be performed by an approved contractor witnessed by the city. So again, that's a change in procedures. The standards for sewer essentially mimic the standards for water, so it should be very consistent across the board and hopefully easy for contractors and developers to maintain.
Good question.
Alderman Ross.
So what currently goes on now for 2 inch or smaller?
They're currently performed by the contractor.
Okay, so we're taking on more work in this.
Yes.
Is there a reason why?
Right, so currently anybody doing work in the city can tap the main. Water main, sewer main, don't matter what size it is. We would just like, the smaller stuff we can handle on our own, it'll be exposed, it won't be a huge time thing, but having the control of when the main gets tapped, how it gets tapped, to make sure that someone's doing it, knows what they're doing, because you could build a house or you could tap the main right now if you wanted to in the city without any further experience or any knowledge of it.
So I kind of get that from a quality standpoint. Is there a reason why we didn't consider that it be done by an approved contractor and witnessed by the city?
By what, Richard? I'm sorry.
That we didn't just take the whole approach of any tap should be performed by an approved contractor and witnessed by the city?
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, we've just seen this go wrong so many times that for anything that we have the capability to do it ourselves, we would just prefer to do it ourselves, because when it goes wrong, it's usually very costly to the city. So it's just better if we have the taps that size, we can show up on site and tap something within like 15 minutes. So we would just prefer to do it ourselves and avoid there being any damage to the line when we have the capability to do that. When it's a larger one, we absolutely are fine with a contractor doing it themselves, as long as it's an approved contractor and as long as we can witness it. But for the small stuff, it's just better if we tap it ourselves. That's the way we look at it.
I'll just say it seems counterintuitive. The ones we have bigger risks on are the larger taps. And so now maybe there's less of those. And with all due respect, and Zach and Nathan are new, but great confidence in them. To be quite honest, gentlemen, we can't take care of what we have right now. I'm not convinced that we should be taking on more. But go ahead.
Can I interject real quick? Aren't we still under the public hearing portion of this agenda? So therefore, questions and answers from the board will be on the next part of the agenda?
Okay,
That's
fair
correct.
enough.
Yep.
Make note to come back because I have some follow-up I want to ask on that too.
Okay, staying on that same page, at the very bottom of your page, you'll see the paragraph that starts "to all practical extents." What this paragraph is in place and intended for is that when possible, developments will include one main lift station rather than individual grinder stations at each lot. So we have experienced developments in the city where it would be feasible for a developer to put in one lift station and plumb the entire development to run to that one lift station. For whatever reasons, they have determined it was in their better interest to put individual grinder stations serving each property. That is certainly something that we look at that puts more burden on the city, more maintenance, just more stations to maintain. So the goal there is, whenever possible, we want developers to put in one lift station rather than individual grinder stations. Going to the next page, I think 10 of 14.
Page 47.
You'll see under item number 13, about 3/4 of the way down the page. This is in regard to access to grinder stations. This is something that we commonly see as problematic around the city. Grinder stations that have been put in with very challenging access for staff to reach. So this requires that access be provided to any grinder station being installed. And that was all I wanted to comment on sewer. And then I believe just one item under storm drainage. Page 2 of 10 on storm drainage.
Page 64, did you say 2 of 10 of storm drainage? Page
Correct.
64.
On page 64, under erosion and sediment control plan A4A, you'll see that that has been revised to say wire back silt fencing with steel T-posts or an approved equal method. And that's just based on some recent development that occurred where we allowed an alternate to the wire back steel fencing with steel T-posts. And that was all I had that I wanted to comment on. Certainly happy in the appropriate session to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. As Alderman Osteen pointed out, this is the public hearing portion of this agenda tonight. Is there anybody here from the public who would like to speak on this matter? All right. I'm sorry? All right, I thought I heard somebody say something. All right, so at this time, I believe we can go ahead to have a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Alderman Rucker. Second. Alderman Hoffman has a second. Roll call, please.
Alderman Barella.
Yes.
Alderman Rucker.
Yes.
Alderman Hoffman.
Yes.
Alderman Osteen.
Yes.
Alderman Ross.
Yes.
Alderman Monroe.
Yes.
All right, public hearing portion of the agenda has been closed. Now we're going to move on to the discussion item. City code changes to design guidelines related to water and sewage system, storm drainage and road cut, utility trench, and excavation permit. So at this point in time, do I have any comments or questions from the board? Alderman Hoffman.
Just the last thing you were discussing there.
Is your mic on, sir?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The last thing you were discussing, which is on page 64, the wired back silt fencing with steel posts or an approved equal method. Who is establishing the approved equal method? Because it seems we've had a problem with that in the past, where all of a sudden it just turned into, you know, some fencing that they had back in their shed got thrown up. So who?
Public Works Operations Manager.
Okay. So, I mean, do you have like a set of alternatives already, or do they have to bring them to you for approval? How's that work?
Right. Bring it to approval because in instances, scope or scale of the project, the erosion control method didn't need to require wire back silt fence with T-posts. So they can scale it based on the engineering design and see if it'll be approved.
Okay.
Kind of a case-by-case thing, but yeah.
Case by case. Excellent. All right. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Alderman Osteen.
It's more or less kind of a general question. Anytime we're revising guidelines and I see that we're removing verbiage regarding a minimum or a not to exceed, et cetera, I go through the guidelines and see where we are addressing that. And I see several instances in these documentation where we are removing certain guidelines, but I don't see where we basically are instigating or stating, here are the new guidelines. For example, if you go to page 10 of 119 of the packet, section C, number 3, the minimum size main allowable for domestic residential services is 2 inches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see where we basically then have said, okay, then what is the minimum size allowable for domestic residential services?
Should be
Normally it's
six.
a give and take. We're going to replace this requirement with a new requirement. But there are several items on here where I don't see where that verbiage has come full circle. I can give you a couple more examples as well.
I have some, I had some of those, or some questions that I had along that same line.
Another example, page 40 of 119 in the packet, under gravity sewers, number 1, gravity sewer lateral lines from a residence to a grinder station or main shall not exceed, this is under item C, shall not exceed 150 feet in length. I don't see where then we said should not exceed 200 feet in length, or what is the new guideline?
Quite frankly, on that one, we're not attempting to impose a maximum length.
Okay.
I don't know why that was considered important at the time it was put in here, but as the city, you don't own the lateral lines. And my thought is if an individual wants to put in a longer sewer lateral that they're going to own and maintain, that would be their decision.
Then it would not be in our best interest as a city basically to have that stated verbatim, that there is no minimum length requirement under that subheading? Or no
Maximum.
maximum? It's called a CYA, and I don't have to explain that. Just curious.
I think that's maybe one we could discuss and see how we can appropriately incorporate that.
Okay. I'm going to give you another example on page, and keep in mind, all of my page numbers on the bottom right-hand corners are cut off, so I'm scrambling to, I think it's page 46 of the 119. Under hydraulic design considerations, once again, if you go under section number 3, items C, minimum depth of the inlet pipe shall be 18 to 20 inches, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like, once again, we are, in certain areas, we're dictating a minimum and maximum. In other areas, we aren't replacing a minimum or maximum, and I think, therefore, we should have it stated in the guidelines that there is no minimum or maximum for those items we are removing. I'm just using that example of how we are revising, once again, minimum versus maximum or not to exceed numbers. And if we remove them all together, then we need to state that verbatim, that there is no minimum or maximum on whatever pipe length, et cetera, et cetera.
I would request that maybe give us an opportunity to go through the design guidelines and look for where we have eliminated items. And if it hasn't been replaced, we'll address it.
Okay.
'Cause I think trying to answer all this right on the fly, I think there were some items where we felt like the information was included in the wrong place. So it's eliminated out of a section where we didn't feel like it belonged and added back in a later section. So
And the examples I've given, I've tried to go through the guidelines.
Okay.
And once again, this is all Greek to me. I am not a sewer specialist or a water specialist, but I've gone through the guidelines trying to match up, once again, where we're removing, where we're revising that, or where else is that coming, or being presented. And the examples I've given you, I don't see where that has been addressed later in the guidelines.
We'll
just
do,
work for us to basically circle back.
we'll do a review with a specific eye for that, for your comment.
Okay, and I can independently, you send some other examples that I have of, once again, we're removing minimums or maximums. Either we need to have that verbatim if there is a minimum maximum, or where else in the guidelines did we replace that information? And that's all I have.
All right, further comments, questions from the board?
I do have a list of questions from Alderman Ross that I have all the answers to that I can go through with Zach here
Certainly,
if you're okay with that, sir.
certainly.
All right, so we're going to start on page 8. And again, I'm referring to the page numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. Zach, can you explain to the board what ultimate means, please?
I'm sorry, what means?
If you look at the columns, you've got 1999, 2019, and then ultimate.
Okay,
The third column was a projected goal to get at. I would assume that that's what they set that as, is that's their benchmark to be. And I would assume that they're trying to think 2029 based on the 10-year scale out to try to see where they're at. But the ultimate would be max capacity, which in some instances we've exceeded it, yeah.
Based on current knowledge of usage. Okay, good, thanks. I wasn't sure what it meant, thank you.
All right, next page, page 9. Under A1C, hydrant spacing in commercial or industrial area shall not be less than 300. That is a typo. It says shall be not less than 300, but it is a typo. Hydrant spacing in commercial and industrial areas shall not be less than 300. And Zach, could you just briefly explain exactly what that means real quick?
Right, we just want our hydrant space at a minimum distance of 300 foot. So, but yeah, it's just a typo. Reads funny.
Cool.
Reads wrong.
All right, so the next one is on page,
14.
I think, 14, yeah, 14.
This is the ductile iron.
Yeah. So Zach, please explain to the board why we are still okay with including ductile iron as a type of pipe on the water side of things.
It's keeping this on the water side. It's a common pipe type, but we don't experience the problems with a gravity sewer line. The water doesn't eat away at it. It's almost, I would say, preferred longevity than C900. It just doesn't, in a water system, it is a higher standard pipe than C900 or C905. It just doesn't, I know we hear ductile a lot on the backside with the gravity sewer and the issues we're having with the H2S eat it away, but in the water system, we don't have any concerns with it.
Do we have any of this now?
Oh yeah, we have
That's
ductile
6
iron
inches
mains.
or more?
Yeah, we have 12-inch. A lot
Okay,
of our 12-inch, man.
And so have we, and I appreciate it, and I understand how we feel that the sewer gas is what deteriorates the ductile iron. However, I just think the strength of the, for lack of a better term, plastic pipe is so much more strong. So the question is, have we ever cambered them to see that we think there's no deterioration? To be quite honest, the ductile iron that we have in the water system is probably fairly new. Am I right? Right. So
Well, some of it runs the mains on the parkway and stuff, the older stuff, but
I mean, if there's some way we can, and I'm okay with this right now, okay, because probably there's a fair chance that we have less risk with water pipe than sewer pipe for ductile iron.
Right.
But we probably, if we get an opportunity, just to try to verify that, because I think we all know that the plastic pipe with with the standards that we have is so much more resilient over time than ductile iron. I'm just concerned that we aren't setting ourselves up for trouble and
And I would say that the main breaks I've had since I've been here, one has been ductile iron leaking on a bell joint, and all the rest have been the C905.
Really?
So, yeah. And it would be
you're
hard to verify without using some kind of ultrasound pipe check. Like getting inside of them is impossible because they're full of water. We can't shut them down to stick a camera in them.
Can't isolate the pipe so that you can put a
Kill-
camera in it?
Yeah, you'd kill portions of town or,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thanks.
All right, so page 19.
Yes.
So at the top of page 19, it says, trench backfill materials shall not contain any material with a normal particle size greater than 6 inches. Zach, can you explain that, please?
And you were assuming that that was too big, that size?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
You start dropping 6-inch rock on pipe, and I get antsy. I mean, I like it better. I mean, you can see the previous the guideline basically was sand or less than 1 inch.
So this
and
actually-
I realize there's a difference between bedding, if I can finish, I realize there's a difference between bedding and backfill.
Right.
But still, contractors dropping 6 or 8 inch pipe or 6 or 8 inch rock, which if we tell them 6, they'll be 8. I'm sorry, but that's just reality. Onto pipe as we backfill scares me a little bit, to be quite honest. I'd rather see it much smaller myself.
Yeah, so the minimum standard now is 6 inches of type 5, MoDOT type 5 on the bottom, 12 inches of MoDOT type 5, which would be your 1 inch minus. And then this would refer to just the backfill they're putting on top of that 12 inches of bedding. And that, we actually added this. It wasn't in there previously because we're pulling out 2-foot boulders, 3-foot boulders. So this was added in to keep us from, there's bigger stuff in there right now to keep from the real big stuff going back in.
So I think what you're telling me is and maybe I haven't caught on here, so there's a bedding, which is
6
what it lays
inches
on
of-
top of,
6 inches, 1 inch minus underneath it, 12 inches of 1 inch minus on top of it.
and then the 6 inches above that.
Yeah. And then,
Okay.
so everything above that,
Is that just a surface coat on the 6 inch?
well, so if we're burying at
Down to the ground 3
36,
foot.
Oh, shit.
yeah, it's a 2 to 3 foot of fill with nothing larger than 6 inches on it would be in that hole, in that ditch.
Okay. All right.
All right, so we're going to move on to page 23, and we're going to look at D. D1, little I. And I think this is just another typo. This says sample to be taken ever 1,200 of new main. It should say sample should to be taken every 1,200 feet.
Should we say what? Can you say that again, please?
It should read, sample to be taken every, with a Y on the end there,
Right.
1,200 feet.
Feet, okay.
Yes. And I think that was your only question there, sir?
On that one, yes, on that page, sure.
All right, so let's go on to 47, page 47, item 12.
So my concern on this one is the 2 inches not enough on the uphill side, but if you all are telling me that we're gonna get grinder, if the standard is, it's gonna have a 2.5 or a 5-foot radius around it that is
Right.
completely flat,
Should never get in there.
okay. All
And
right,
it was
then-
a
then
working-
2 inches, are you sure 2 inches is enough? Because all I can see is I see stuff sloughing off on these hills, and 2 inches of separation becomes minus 1 inch of separation, and we got rock on top of them over time. But if you're gonna have 5, or, by the way, is the 5 foot, and so I don't know who best to ask, is that 5 foot radius around it, or is
From the
that?
edge of the can.
Huh?
From the edge of the can, so it wouldn't matter on
5
this.
foot from the edge of the can, it's
So it
gonna be
wouldn't
level all the
matter-
way around?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
It's
There'll
a,
be some retaining walls built around here.
well, yeah, it was one of those safety concerns that the guys working on some of this stuff,
Okay.
their sides of hills, and,
If-
yeah.
On flat ground, 2 inches is, if you're comfortable 2 inches is enough, it may be, but I just like to make sure we got plenty, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Because the I&I is just incredible.
And it was another working consideration too. If we start moving higher, getting the pump out and over, to have to
That
lift
lip?
it anymore over a lip or get it in over a lip.
Okay. Very good.
All right, so the next one is on page 93, and it's number 3. And Richard, I believe this is the same 6-inch or less issue only on the sewer side, so I think we've already answered that.
Page 93?
Yep.
That 93 was the asphalt.
Oh, I apologize then. Go ahead with your 93, because I wrote it down wrong.
So number 8, asphalt pavement. This is road cut utility trenches, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's been how would I say, a burr in my backside for a long time, and that is that we put these beautiful roads in, and, you know, somebody builds a house or whatever the case may be, and we have to, the sewer's not on the right side, or the electrical's on the wrong side. We get this trench across there, and we throw some asphalt in it, and it's okay for a few months, and the next thing you know, within 6 months to a year, it feels like at least half a pothole, okay? And over time, I've talked to Lloyd about it. Lloyd's reaction was, we ought to quit doing asphalt. What I've seen where it has been done concrete, I agree with Lloyd. At the very least, if we're gonna allow asphalt, and I would recommend we don't on these, that there's at least 6 inches, because it's constantly settling. We don't put a road in at 3 inches that I know of. And so if you guys wanna, depending on what the board thinks, or you guys wanna recommend, there's some people, at one point I talked to Rob about this. Rob's concern was more about the cost of concrete. I don't know that it's really that much more.
If
The
you
labor's all the same. Pardon me?
Yep, sorry to interrupt. Short loading a truck.
I'm sorry?
If you short load a concrete truck, they still charge you for the full truck if you get less than.
You can't
I think,
order a
4
couple yards of concrete?
No, but asphalt, since we have dump trucks, we can go to the asphalt plant, we can get any tonnage we want. Well, you can order the concrete, but they'll short load you and charge you extra for it. That might
All
be
I
the
know
most
is that, it seems to me like these trench cuts, there's gotta be a better way than what we're doing, and I hope we can find a better way than what is currently in the guidelines, because it's not working.
And if the concrete's costing us more, theoretically, we should be putting the asphalt down, go back and redoing it again, so in the long run, we're spending the same money. Because we're having to go back and fix now this trench that's become a pothole.
A good example of it's right there in front of the 1913 restaurant. That's the best example I know of where you can tell that it's dropped
1934.
like 4 inches.
Reserve is 1930.
Okay, sorry.
The Osage River then.
I was sorry, I was going to throw out Osage
Okay,
Beach Road.
let's do one at a time if you don't mind, please. I'm sorry, Alderman Osteen, yes.
I was going to throw out Osage Beach Road as a good example of what Alderman Ross is talking about, because there are several trench cuts on that road, which are obviously settling, so it is like reverse speed bumps that you're hitting throughout that road. And your 1934 reserve, that is one of the several on that road where their trench cuts basically have settled, and it's just not eye-appealing or conducive for easy driving. So that's all.
Alderman Ross.
And so that's all I have, other than I want to talk about the taps that we just started to discuss. So if you want to finish that, go right ahead. Zach, I don't know if you want to respond.
Yeah. We had mentioned doing it a couple different ways. So I know when we talked with the building department, it was always a time thing. They wanted people to be out there quicker, which we feel like we could respond faster. And then when charging the fees for the impact fees, if we include it, then we're tapping the main, but it's still included even if an approved contractor taps the main. So one way or the other, but it was kind of, in the discussion, it was going, do we want to do the approved contractor and have issues with people waiting and waiting and waiting and not getting it done quick enough, or does the city do it? And at that time, we kind of decided we would just do it. That way, it's just consistent as far as the impact fees go. We don't have to worry about, did the city tap it, did somebody else tap it? And we have had issues in the past where taps were performed incorrectly and we had to do main shutdowns to get the bid back out.
I'll just say that in my experience, I've never seen the water department not to be able to respond in less than 3 or 4 hours. And if what I think I'm hearing here, you don't need to necessarily respond, is that contractors don't like to plan ahead and they just seem to be able to ready jump on a moment's notice. And their lack of prior planning doesn't constitute a mercy on our part. That's been something I've said in my career for a very long time. And so I'm very sensitive about you all taking on more work. And so you guys can think about that feedback and so forth, but I caution you greatly to leave it on the contractor. They're the ones that are asking to tap our system, all right? They should work with us and it should be easier for us. And while I understand customer service, okay, at the same time, they can plan a little better because I've never seen you all not be able to react in less than 3 or 4 hours. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
And
So that's not good enough generally? There's been times when that's not good enough?
Well, we don't do it now. The concern was that, like you're saying, poor planning. They want the main tap now. It was easier for Lloyd. Lloyd had to, because Lloyd inspects the tap. So to wait on the contractor to show up that's going to tap it or do this, he said it would be more easier for it. It would be easier if we were there just doing it. But it was a decision where we were on the fence both ways. We could see the benefit of a contractor doing it. We could see the benefit of us doing it. Whether we do it or an approved contractor, if you decide either way, that would be fine with us. But if we can just move some verbiage to approved contractor versus how it is now where anybody can do it, then
At the very least, I understand. Okay.
yeah, if the board wants it that way, that'd be just fine with us as well.
And the only other item that I have at this point is the inventory that I honestly didn't catch when I went through. I'm not, first of all, do you guys have any idea or estimate of what that inventory might cost as far as funds we're going to wrap up in inventory?
We can get that to you. It's something that we had kind of already included in the budget that we had put forth for 2024, so.
Okay. Isn't this some other task that we're going to have to manage for a contractor, for lack of a better term? I mean, at the end of the day, I watch construction out here, and it goes a lot slower than for years I've watched, okay? I'm really not concerned about that, and I'm not sure it's a service that is significant, but what am I missing? Because I know it sounds good.
So we already do this on the water side. So we buy all the meters, we buy all the setters. When a contractor gets a permit, they eventually call the water foreman or Zach, and they come over and we give them the water meter and the setter. So what we're trying to do here is do the same thing on the sewer side with just a can package. And this was really born out of COVID. During COVID, we had contractor after contractor that tried to get sewer cans, and they couldn't. They just couldn't because of supply chain issues at the time, all of that kind of thing. So this is really just a customer service thing on our end. All they do, we order them, we keep them in our inventory. A contractor gets their permit through the building department, and when they're ready for the can, they come over, they load it into their truck from our warehouse, and they go and set it, and then Lloyd or Cochran inspects it, just like we do on the water side. So it's more of a consistency thing. We don't have to do it if the board doesn't want us to do it, but Just a consistent thing and a customer service thing.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I guess what I would say is Zach and I and Nathan all talked in the last day or so about how much we're reacting in the sewer department versus maintenance and taking on more tasks, okay? One way or another, this is more of a task. I would much rather see us get to the point that we are in much more of a maintenance mode, which I think Zach's estimate was we're at about 85%, 80 or 85% is reactive, and 10 to 15% or so is maintenance. When we see that model move to a much different, like maybe 60% maintenance and 40%, maybe this is appropriate, just my own opinion, okay? I think that we should consider that. I'm not convinced that it's as big an issue as it was. If we'd have known COVID was coming, then yeah, it would have been great to probably stock them up. Are we seeing that issue still today? That there's a significant lead time issue that's giving contractors fits?
4 months. They're not excessive when you think about the time it takes to build, the scope of the project. When the ordering, if the contractor orders ahead of time, usually fine. If it's not, then it runs into issues. And this was kind of built out of a hardship thing that was going on, where we were going to try to allow approved equal, and we didn't want to do that for the maintenance standpoint. So instead of somebody not being able to get a sole source item, they could go with a different pump and panel. We wanted to eliminate that, and this is kind of how we sidestepped and eliminated that by making it available to anybody. But 4-month lead time on a panel, 5 months maybe. So if it's planned ahead and bought, it should be fine by the time the house is built.
Okay.
But yeah, it was kind of in lieu of adding an approved equal, where we could keep one single system across the board, we added this.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
All right, Alderman Rucker.
As a follow-up to that, I have two concerns that I think we need to investigate. One is we are buying these products as a municipal government. We're buying them on a bid process. We better make sure that we have the right to resell, because we may not have the right to resell those items. The second thing is when we do resell those items, we aren't charging sales tax. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot, or some other municipality where that product is being sold, because there's being no sales tax put on that item. So those are two concerns I have. Sales tax is just it's an issue. We're taking money away from somebody, okay? But the other thing is the concern about the resale. Make sure that because if we're dealing with contracts that are through the state or wherever we buy them from, we make sure that we can resell them.
Okay, right. And we've looked into this, and with it being a sole sourced item, we were going to charge the same price that municipal charges because we receive a discount on it. So it would never be an instance where we'd be price gouging a customer, or the pricing would be straight across the board. What they bought it from municipal, they would get it from us as.
That was very important to me when we started having to see this, is like, because of a government and bidding process and different price points, it's different than the private side. We are not doing this to give them a leg up on cost. We're doing this more the convenience. So it's not the same dollar for dollar always.
Are we including the freight that we're paying, so we're not
But-
losing money?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
They individually will not get the same government discount, so it would be higher to them. We're not trying to circumvent that they would get a benefit through buying for us. It was,
I'm not opposed to it. I just
I'm
want to
just
make sure
saying
we're dotting I and crossing our T with some of these
that was, yeah.
technical things.
All right, did you have anything more, Alderman Rucker?
Okay. Back to page 8-119.
Bottom right?
Yeah, I think that's the number I'm going to try and go
All
by,
right.
even though it's hard to read because mine kind of cut off too.
8.
8 of 119, yeah, 8. I understand this, a couple of things. You can see my notes are just kind of scribbled all over there. So I got a number of things to talk about. This is a chart, if I understand correctly, that says this is what's happened in 99, this is what's happened in 2019, and the ultimate is what we think we should be prepared to have happen, okay? The first comment I have is, why is it under the west side water? There is no required water supply. Because if you look at the east side, it tells you it talks about what our gallons per minute daily is, and our tanks and et cetera. Then it's the required water supply on the east side is 1,094 gallons ultimate. There is no computation for that on the west side. Did it get missed out of this information? Because this is valuable information from my little world.
I guess I'm not following what you're saying. Can you say it one more time?
Numbers he's using. I know, but he said 1,090. I'm like, I don't see what number he's just repeated.
I see. Okay.
So,
Sorry. Yeah.
On west side versus.
I understand now. There's a section
Probably
missing.
something
There's
just got
one
missed, or
in the
was this
east side that's not in the west side. And I think too,
required water
some of these
supply
forecasts and
about
projections aren't available.
I see.
I imagine with the west side water study
I
that
see.
will be available to us.
Well, just trying to think of the best way to answer this.
I can't, this is.
And
These tables can certainly be updated.
It's got 3 cents numbers.
And I agree 100%. This is very valuable information.
All right. So let's just-
I've always thought it was a little bit peculiar that this information was included in the design guideline, because this really isn't relevant to a engineer or contractor being asked to design or construct infrastructure within the city. This is more relevant to the authors of the design guidelines who are trying to ensure that the infrastructure gets put in to support the infrastructure that's needed by the city.
I agree with that. That was another comment on this page I have, was why is it in the guidelines?
I tend to agree with you on that. Again, it's important data, and it's data that the city needs to understand. I'm not sure that it belongs in the design guidelines.
I mean, I have some questions on this data sheet just from a perspective of knowledge, budgeting, and et cetera, but that information was missing, which hurt me to do some of my calculations I wanted to do. And then the other thing is why is that in the guidelines? If we don't need to have it there, and if you can justify why we should, I don't have any problem, but what value is it to be in the guidelines?
right, and I don't have an issue with it too. If the board
I
wants to
think
remove it,
it's
we'll
something
remove
that
it.
we need to maintain. This is good information, because, I mean, basically what it tells me is the fact that, our storage capability is okay, because our daily storage on the east side is 1.2 million, and our usage is 1.3 million, our storage is 1.3 million and our usage is 1.2 million, on a gallon, and the projections, on both of these, though, what I would ask you to do is to continue to maintain this data.
Correct.
But I would ask you for 2 more bits of information. One is, on the east side, we have the capability of obtaining water from Lake of the Ozarks. And we have opportunity to provide water to the Lake of the Ozarks. What is what could we expect? Because when things go bad, and somebody's got to sit there and say, okay, we've just lost a tower. The plane just hit this water tower, and we're not going to get one here for months on end. How are we going to fix this problem? How much can we get from Lake Ozark? And then on the vice versa, if Lake Ozark comes to us and say, hey, we're going to be long-term guys, how much can you give us?
Right.
That'd be information. And the same, I understand, on this side of town, we have that, I believe we're supposed to have that same
Last text with the hospital.
working relationship with the hospital. And that would be good to know that information, that kind of data. We don't need to be running around getting it when the disasters happen. It'd be nice if we had all that stuff ahead of time. That's the value of this sheet here.
Okay.
So one of the items that Cochrane's been tasked with is preparing and updating your water system master plan. In my view, the appropriate location for all this information that we're discussing would be in that master plan, and that will be presented to this board later this year prior to your upcoming budget cycle. So I think if it's okay with the board, kind of what I'm hearing is I think it may be appropriate to pull this information out of the design guidelines, and then if that timeline's okay with you, all these scenarios and capacities that you're requesting, that all would be included in the master plan.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Can I tag on one quick question?
Certainly. Alderman
On
Ross.
this? Kevin, do you mind if I tag one quick
No,
question?
go
on
ahead,
this?
go ahead.
So Dave, are you all, when, in your study, because what isn't here is peak daily demand? Is that going to be addressed in your study?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next page, page 9. And actually, it kind of tags in a couple different pages, but let's go to page 9. Placement of fire hydrants. Okay, did you guys use ISO standards, NFPA standards, or International Building Code standards? Which standard are you using? Because in my opinion, what you should be using is designs of systems should be following the ISO standard guidelines. That's what should be followed for our designing of systems. When you're looking at developers coming in and individual buildings being put in, then you need to be looking at the international code or the NFPA, because they deal more specifically with that specific building. Because it looks like here we're looking at designing this thing and talking about where hydrants go as it relates to building locations rather than from a design. We are the designer, we are the infrastructure, so we should be putting it out as a big program. When you come down to needing some specific items or specific needs of fire hydrants and valving and stuff, that really should be following the guidelines of the International Building Code that the architect and designer should be bringing forth to us. The good example is the fact that you're asking to go to the 300 foot or less on the fire hydrant placements. When you look at ISO codes, which I happen to have here, basically you've got two different guidelines you should be following. One is for your multifamily developments, which is every 500 foot placement, and the other one is for your residential, which is every 1,000. So we as a my opinion, we as the provider of the utility, we should be doing the big picture. We put them in every 1,000 foot where it's a residential area. They come down there and they put in multifamily, or they rezone it, then it's up to them to, since the developer has changed their what the basic plan was set up, then they're the ones that need to put in the additional, pay for the additional water main, or either bigger mains or different high hydrant locations. That's my 2 cents. That's obviously the old fire chief in me. Actually, the fire chief would be on the other side. The fire chief would say, I want them every 300 feet.
Right, and that's what I would.
But the fire chief would, but I'm also representing the utility and the city and the funds that the city spends. So I'm trying to look at.
And our current spacing in the field right now is 300 foot. And I guess I'm with the fire chief that I like him at.
Yeah, because I was the fire chief when this was written.
Yeah.
But we need to be thinking about, with some of the changing down on item 2, you're going from 850 to 600.
Totally lost.
Item 2 on that page.
Yes.
And you're talking about residential. When you're in a residential area, residential per ISO requirements is every 1,000 feet. I think that needs to be considered.
So one thing I will say on that during the plan review stage, which is probably where this comes in, and the different types of development and the different fire protection requirements, part of that permittee's requirement is they submit to the fire department also. So the fire department certainly has the opportunity to dictate what they see as the fire protection requirements on the project.
This is a freaking mess.
I think that being said, we've kind of tried to outlay some general requirements that we want to see as the city. And then that could be made more stringent by the fire department.
And that's why I'm saying I think we should follow the ISO, the Insurance Service Office, general requirements for design guidelines for designing of systems. Page 10, item 7 on the isolation valves. I echo Matthew Marshnick, I believe is his name.
Marshke.
He also sent in a question, and this was one, after I went through it, I read his was at the end of my packet, and I was like, oh, somebody else thought the same thing I did. Again, I think that the valving is something that we need to be looking at from a standpoint of what's the most efficient way for us from the design standpoint of it. And I realize segmenting breaks, et cetera, but I think we have to be cautious here on how much footage and what we're going to put in there. And I don't know if, I just think we need to be, the guidelines need to be very flexible, and I'm not sure this is flexible enough, and I don't know, I just have some concerns as Matthew did there. Again, once the break is, you've always said, oh, I wish we'd have put a valve there, so we could have separated or segmented in, but.
Right, and this one, we did mimic the DNR minimum design standards, so that's where we got that spacing from. And I don't know, I guess with the same thing with the hydrants, these costs aren't incurred by the city, the contractor's putting them in when they build out. I don't know, we see a lack of valves in the field too, so that's why we wanted to tighten up the spacing, and then that's where we got the standard from, was from the, so.
Didn't really have an opinion one way or the other. I was just I was like, why? Why do we need that? Is that too little or is that too much? Or I just couldn't understand why we came up with that number.
Yeah, it came out of the DNR minimum design standards.
Page 15. Item 2, 1. I think it's just a mistake on typo at,
I see it.
shouldn't we say shall be approved by the Public Works Operation Manager or designee? We've included or designee every place else. And for here, we've eliminated, we're not allowing a designee to approve. Every place else you have, the operations manager or designee, but here you've removed it. I don't know if you have a reason not to allow somebody, the designee, to do that, okay, or if it's just a typo that.
Or shall be approved by the public. Oh, I see. Okay.
We'll fix it.
And the exact same information or exact same thing I just explained is also on page 34. You've done exactly the same thing I just mentioned there.
34
Yes.
on the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes. I think that's page 34.
It is.
This is
My 34 is halfway cut.
mine too. Thrust block detail?
It says there in green, in red, Director, Operation Manager, or designee.
Right before all the charts.
It's a different page.
We'll just go through everything, and if there's a designee missing, we'll just add them
Well, what
to
happened
every
is,
one of
for some
them.
reason, those were the only two that I caught where the designee was strict, was striked.
I should have known that you would check them all.
And the other question I had, and I can't remember what page now, but anyway, and Mr. Matthew brought it up as well, and it has to do with the designation of a specific electrical panel, and I know, and specific pump, ours specifically does, and I understand why we're doing that, because obviously It makes it easier for us to keep parts, on the backside and afterwards. I don't know. I don't know what a good answer for it is, other than, is there another justification besides that? I mean, I'm not saying we need to change it. I understand where they're saying, well, you're requiring us to buy that specific pump or that specific electric panel or that specific one. And is it just because we're going to be maintaining it and we don't want to have parts for?
Right. Everything's interchangeable. When the guys come up to the panel, they know what they're looking at. A 2-horse and the larger lifts are going to look the same to them. I mean, it's all, the ABS. Solar panels. So it's just like when you get to it, the pumps have different start capacitors in them. So certain pumps need higher starting amps to get them turning. And now if you pull a pump out, you can replace one back in. And we're not coming up to a Franklin pump and we've got a Sulzer pump on the truck. So it's all interchangeable. As far as training goes, it's easier because everything's similar. Parts management, it's easier. I know it's been an issue in the past. It seems to be a reoccurring one with just sole sourcing one system. But as far as maintaining it and the guys learning on it, it's beneficial the way it is.
I understand. I just.
And I think,
I see the other side to where it's like, okay, we're mandating you got to buy from this company.
Right.
But I also.
And on our side, it's hard too because you can't get competitive bidding. If you're only sticking with a sole source, we have to buy it from them. But then we don't want to open the system up to 15 different pump and panel manufacturers where we have to maintain 15. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know what the best answer is either.
I don't either. I think we're at the best spot, but it's just something.
It's very convenient the way it is now, but it's not,
Okay.
So you ask about anything else that might be an advantage. Well, it creates purchasing power at the very, we're probably one of their larger customers, okay, with all the different pumps and so forth. Now, whether or not we can validate that we get that purchasing power, that may be a challenge. Given the fact we have Nathan here, you might take him aside. He might be able to give us some insight to that because he used to work for him. I don't know. But theoretically, it should give us more purchasing power.
Alderman Monroe?
We receive a 25% discount on everything that we buy from municipal equipment.
That doesn't sound like enough.
Alderman Monroe?
Zach, going back on the page 3 of 18 regarding the fire hydrants, have you had any time or any of the crew of doing any more assessment of placement of the fire hydrants we have in our city? And I know it's a massive project, but where you and I were with the one resident, it was going to have to be, that hydrant's going to have to be replaced closer to the home.
Correct.
For the access. Have you found any others because of the older residents that I still have that same problem?
I haven't done it yet. We don't have a GIS technician right now, and I want to do that spatially with a buffering tool through GIS instead of manually looking at all of them. I think it'll be more accurate and faster, but we're not doing anything right now because we don't have a GIS technician on staff at the moment.
Right. I don't want that to be tabled. I want to be sure that's on the list of priorities.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Alderman Ross?
There was one request that I forgot to bring up, but it's best it's at the end anyway. Could these details be set up as separate files online so that a design engineer could just grab that detail file and drop it into their design versus trying to manipulate it out of a PDF file?
Well, I believe they're already separated by section on the website. Is that
But in
not
other
right,
words,
Tina?
Just legible PDF files. What he's saying is
Let's just say detail X, whatever it is, can that be a separate file so they can just grab that, pull it, okay, and drop it into their plans? And there's no question about any problems because sometimes between softwares and trying to manipulate and grab out, there can create some confusion. But that was just a request, and so I thought I'd ask.
Okay, that was a request from a local engineer?
Yeah.
Okay. should be able to take the PDFs that are that will be posted online, and you can insert PDFs directly into CAD files. And there shouldn't be any
Okay.
conversion issue there.
We'll
So-
talk offline then.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe there's something we can talk with that specific engineer. Maybe there's something about the way we're saving out the PDFs or something that's causing an issue that we could help them out.
You might have to have a certain PDF platform, because they got
Yeah.
lots of,
Yeah.
but you can't buy the basic, and it probably won't do it.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Mr. Welty, do you have enough information then?
Yeah, we do. We've got some great information. We've made notes on everything. We've got some direction on some changes here. We're going to be meeting within the next week or so to review everything that was discussed here today, make those changes, and then our next course of action is going to take this to the Planning Commission. I've already spoke with Mr. Patterson. He's kind of got a space saved for us in June. So our plan is to take this to the Planning Commission in June. Once it passes the Planning Commission, we will bring it to the Board of Aldermen for a first and second reading. And hopefully by the end of July, depending upon how long it takes us to go through everything and when the Planning Commission meeting is, we should have everything back to the board for final approval, and look for all the changes that we talked about tonight when you see that, when it comes back to you. So if there are any other follow-up questions, or if anybody has something that they forgot about, feel free to give me a call. Feel free to give Zach or Nathan a call, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. That's pretty much all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, our last item tonight is discussion on proposed water and sewage user change rates. City Administrator Gina Woods, please.
Yes, Mayor, members of the board. So I'm going to try to be quick, concise, because my ultimate goal here is, you told me to come back with options. Do you like which option? What do you don't like about the options? And we either go back to the drawing board, or I've got a timeline figured out. So for the interest of those listening and Celeste, I'll kind of repeat some history. We started discussing water and sewer rates when we were going through the budget process last year, when we were going through the workshops and preparing the 2024 budget. During multiple conversations, and I didn't write down every meeting we discussed this, but in the fall and winter, I was asked that when I would be bringing rates back, which we had increased rates last May. So we had been discussing that back in last spring. I had told you at budget time that we were in the process of reviewing said rates based on what actually happened in '23 and what was being adopted in '24. Kind of a consensus or direction by the board at that time, because we had a discussion in January where I gave some drafts and we discussed which way to go on the rates. At that time, it was a kind of a consensus or direction from the board that we wanted to move to rates fully paying its share of the water and sewer requirements that it matches. In other words, eliminating and or drastically decreasing the CIT funds. Historically, our capital improvement tax since inception, which has been a long time ago, has been water and sewer operations have been subsidized by said tax. I went back to 2013, which I will say, which I've not shared with all of you, but I do have a summary of user charge revenue and expenses reconciliation from every audit and every trial balance back to 2003. And that's kind of how I've kept track of, so somebody gets to inherit that here in a couple months. But we have subsidized water and sewer, and I'm going to do aggregate because for our audit purposes, it's an aggregate fund. However, we do keep track of them per budget and per expense because there's two separate rates. 1.9 million on average has been subsidized to both the water and sewer. A lot of that obviously started with debt, but as we were paying our bonds off, that was slowly just built into operation. And when I talk about debt and I talk about O&M, for user charge purposes, they are one and the same. For audit purposes, budget purposes, they are not. So I will use that, don't mean to confuse you on that. So based on last winter's conversation, based on January's conversation, I brought before the board We published a public hearing, we brought before the board in March the bills that matched what was asked for, and they were tabled. So last month, we had another discussion on rates. Couple things that the aldermen had asked for, but basically give us a couple options. How do we phase it in over a certain time, reevaluate rates with consideration of subsidies for water and sewer. So that is what I did, but I'm going to explain my process. Since 2003, and I've actually been involved with this since 2005, but I went back to 2003. We have not changed our structure on how we charge since 2007. When we switched our big structure on how we charge for water and sewer, we went through the DNR process. That in itself has not changed. It's just the dollars needed to make the cash flow balance is what's changed. So the last several years, what I've done is, I hate to say work myself backwards, but we spent a lot of time preparing budgets. We spent a lot of time forecasting. And so I have done this I have this cash flow reconciliation also back to many years. And so I've started publishing this over the last few years to help in budget process with cash flow. So I really start with the cash flow. What are we seeing O&M? What are we seeing in capital? What are we seeing in personnel, debt service to figure out, okay, aggregately, what do we need from rates to balance what rates pay for? Now, in water and sewer, I'm not going to get too in-depth. I promise I could talk about this for days probably. There are certain revenue streams in both water and sewer that do not go to pay personnel and O&M. In other words, we collect certain fees that have to go to pay for the treatment plant. They cannot subsidize the water rate. So but the cash flow is aggregately. I keep the details of that behind the scenes. So really what I started with the reevaluation is we already had a cash flow that we have estimated. Public Works, Engineering, Mike has put together a lot of their data, and I did share that with you, although this is my version of it. I took his details, and that's that nice green and purple colored sheet. I'm not going to begin to explain all that. We can have further conversations on that detail, but at the bottom of that, I've reconciled cash flow and user charge reconciliation, because there are some projects that, one, we don't want user rates paying for, because we need to, for example, in sewer, Tantera, we are working on solutions outside of that, which is not considered citywide problem. And then there's some water expenses that are yet to be determined, and that has to do with the manganese and treatment. So there's been several studies recently in both water and sewer that has outlined different expenses. So long story short, you got two different cash flows, but for the purpose of either one of them, I worked myself backwards. I identified what CIT subsidy probably needed to be, started there. We know what our expenses need to cover, and I know what that other incoming that doesn't include rates. So it's like, what is the percent of rate changes needed to meet our cash flow needs that we're estimating from 25 to 28? So I really started with that question and just putting the pieces together. And I started with a full rate increase. So when we add in CIT, took a deeper dive in realizing a depreciation replacement plan, which is also different than a schedule of capital. Again, that's behind the scenes. There's certain things that we are required not only by our ordinance, but by DNR to have a certain amount of reserves. And I will say the last couple years, because we have dealt with many different issues, we have deteriorated our reserves. That's what they're there for. We need to bring them back. That's what you do. You have a savings account, you got to replace your roof, whatever. Now it's time to put them back. So it does all those things. So if you look at the comparison option sheet, and the top page will have the rate schedules. So the first column in the rate option 1 is what percentage of rate increases do we need to do a one-time rate increase to meet with CIT subsidy, to meet our estimated cash flows, compounded all the way to what we're thinking 2028 is looking like. Now keep in mind, a lot of rolling pieces. We may not spend all our funds. We may push projects 25, so I'm assuming all else being equal. That aggregately, you could for simplicity, you could say for both water and sewer, an average 5,000 gallon residential user would see an increase of 33%. And if you remember back in March, I proposed a very high one because the intent and presence or perception that we did not want to subsidize our rates with CIT. So this is with subsidy with CIT plus a little reevaluation of our expenses. So an aggregate, so it's about anywhere from 20 to 25%. You've got a volumetric and a base fee for water. Sewer's 47. But if you aggregately have a sewer and water bill, 5,000 gallons in city, about 33% increase. So about $225 a year. The board wanted to know if we would split that into phases, what would that look like? So to get the same end result, if we would do a partial increase immediately, and I'm assuming this summer sometime, my calculations are based on July, but in reality, I don't know that we would meet that at this point. It would be a 17% increase aggregately for sewer and water, and then in 2025, January 1st would be a 14. So that would get us to the same point in time with some rounding error and some 3 to 5% difference because you do have compounding. Getting money today is worth more than staggering and getting it later. So you are going to see some differences. So that's what the two different cash flows show you, full rate increase immediately, or if you want to separate out in two. I'll be honest with you, given the time, I did not take the time to do a third one. If it is the direction of the board that option one's not an option because we don't want to hit our users with 33%, but yet we don't really want to do a 17 and a 14 back-to-back within 5 months, and you want a third option, I will be happy to recalculate that. That takes me about a day with no interruptions, 3 days with interruptions, so it just did not happen. So ultimately, I want to answer any questions, and we need direction, or I need direction. Do you like one? Do you like two? Do you like neither? And what would you like? Before I shut up and wait for questions, I want to give you a synopsis of a time frame so you'll be thinking about this. We have to have a public notice 30 days prior to any public hearing. So if the soonest, assuming one of these you like and I can throw it on an ordinance, we could do a public notice by the end of next week. That would meet a first reading for June 20th, second reading 7/2. Earliest you could make it effective is 8/1. However, that means customers would pay their new bill in September. So I'm just giving you that timeline because the other thing is how much notice would you prefer the city give their customers? The more notice, the more your cash flow changes. So.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Comments or questions from the board? Alderman Rucker.
I'll start. First of all, I apologize for the direction that you understood the board gave as far as removal of subsidy completely from CIT. I don't recall a discussion. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but that was during budget time, and I don't know. I don't recall that conversation. I don't recall that direction. I don't recall that because I was not in favor of that. So it's shame on me for not listening and paying attention correctly during that time frame because I would have liked to have seen some subsidy. I don't know that I like to see as much as we're doing, but I know I do believe we need to do some subsidy. So I apologize for that excessive work you've done, at least by me not opposing that or raising that issue. With that being said, just a couple of questions so I can understand this a little bit better, Gina. If you look at your cash flow at the July and January one, because it really falls on both of them, but if you look at that, could you tell me on 2024 under water, and then the same thing appears under 2026 under sewer, a $650,000 transfer of funds to other funds.
So if you remember in the 2024 budget, to get sewer to balance, we sewer fund borrowed $650,000 from the water fund, and I'm scheduling the water fund to pay that back in 2026, I think.
Right.
However, that's my estimate.
Yeah,
Somebody else may have a different
2026.
idea in a few months.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
All
what
right.
that is.
No problem. And then in, where am I at here? Oops. Where'd it go? Well, it's underwater. I'm sorry. I got two different sheets. I should have put it all on one sheet. Under 2026, we have a large capital on water of 4 million plus. What's that big?
So if you go to your green and
I tried to, and I
okay,
couldn't
so
follow it.
well, in sewer, no water, that has to do with there is a treatment plant study out now. I know engineers will have that finished. We have that manganese problem. So the departments have estimated the soonest to correct the manganese could as well be a treatment plan for 4.4 million. However, in my reconciliation of cash, I only included 2.2 because there is a possibility, I'm not going to speak for engineering, that's a whole different topic. That study will be done and they will have solutions here shortly, but we're estimating a solution. Either way, we are going to have to deal with our manganese problem, but whether you build a treatment plant to treat it or you abandon that well and you dig a new well and a new tower. So it'll depend on what that water study on that side, but that's the big, but just like we do with budget, the soonest, we don't know when we'll need it, you could get to that budget and it could be pushed off and then you save your reserves and you don't use it because I have looped it into the calculation of how much reserve money we set aside each year to make sure we paid for these things.
Okay, I assumed there was a big project, obviously, and I just.
That's it, and it is still to be determined, and I know 2.2 million versus 4.4 is a
Well,
big thing, but either way, our manganese problem will need to be dealt with,
Well, it's got to be,
and maybe it
you gotta have
happens in
something there to-
26, maybe it
got to
doesn't.
have something there to get started with it.
Correct.
The other thing is, and I realize we are dealing with water and sewer, but in order for me to make my decisions and stuff, I have concerns about how much CIT money we spend. Is it a fair statement to say that from 2025 on, that we could, we have availability of another 500,000 in CIT to be spent on capital projects?
Other capital projects outside water and sewer? Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at both cash flows, like I said, both cash flows does not affect the CIT as I have proposed. And I have proposed 2 million each year to the sewer fund. Minus 1 year is 2.3 to get it to balance. Water was about 375,000. However, in my detail, I've reserved an option for anywhere from 100 to 200 extra thousand for sewer that's not rates because of knowing some projects are coming up. So minus water and sewer totally, by the end of 2028, your CIT forecast could be, I'm going to call it 5 million, 4.99 million. Right. So if you look at that unrestricted line, we are going to pay our last bond off that has any restrictions from CIT's purposes this year. So 2025, we could have just shy of 1.1 million in CIT unrestricted, goes up to 2.8 in 2026. So any of those dollar amounts would be at the discretion of the board at budget time on how you may or may not use those for other capital. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. I mean, I took your cash flow and I modified it to meet what I wanted.
I did not make any other assumptions, and this CIT forecast is what's in the entire budget forecast because I'm not even forecasting outside water and sewer, so it's at the discretion of at budget time.
Well, because my concern is, and I realize, you know, what we do today is what we do today, and a year from now, we can adjust
Well-
up or down, and we can do that every year. Matter of fact, I think that is what has happened to us, is we have not adjusted as often as we should have, and it's just shame on us. And I'm not blaming anybody or throwing any stones at anybody. It's just we should have adjusted more frequently and not gotten so far behind. And that's what I think, because as we move forward, I believe, as I made my comments, the CIT can be used in areas that will free up capital in our general, which we need to be a little more, well, I'm going to be pushing a little bit more in the employee side of the expenditure side of the budget. We need to we need to beef that up. We've been doing a good job, but we need to do a little bit better. We're too far into the middle of the salary benefit area and needing of employees, and we need to be further on the upside. And in order to get that, we need to be able to spend some of our CIT money, which opens up some of our general money that we can be using on personnel. So that's my big picture of it. So thank you.
So can I add one more thing to
Certainly.
that? Rates every year are always, in doing cash flow, rates are always touched. The last rate increase we did was 2018. Technically 2020 or 2021 on my schedule was the year would have been rates, but we all know that changed everybody's priority. So in looking back at my, which I will share this Excel sheet with you, in looking back in that is hindsight being 2020, those were the 2 years it's like, oh, okay, we were within a 2 to 3%. Well, to me, that's a margin of error, 2 to 3% when you're talking about millions. Where we really took the spike is started in late 2022, and 23 is what hit us. So yes, if we'd have had a little bit of increase, even if it was just a CPI increase or whatever in 2020 or 2021, yes, we wouldn't be in this spot, but it would not have been in the high six figures. So past me, that practice will have to continue, whether it's through the budget process, whether it's through reconciliation audit. My successor will decide how that work gets done, but that will have to be in addition to SDCs being reviewed per ordinance every year. That was the opportunity to do this. So I will, if my advice to you guys is, do the 2 phase in, because whoever is me in this year, this time next year, should be doing this same thing. And you're gonna know, oh, okay, was our 2 phases okay? Was it not okay? Can we put back more reserves? So forecasts are only as good as the crystal ball of consistency. Anything can happen, and at budget time, you're even gonna have a better idea of that too.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the board? Alderman Osteen.
Yes, actually, I've got some questions I'm not sure you can answer. I could look at the stats and the proposal changes that we want to make to water and sewer as far as the rates, in-city, out-of-city, metered, non-metered, et cetera. And of course, you could average those out on what's the average cost of the increase per the different categories. But is there a sweet spot? I'm not sure if this is going to go to Gina or to Zach, to say for the average single-family residence, 4-member household, are they on a 1.5 inch?
No,
A
5/8
inch? And what
I can tell you,
What I'm going for is a percentage of how many homes are affected by these rates, i.e. 6% of the homes in the city are on a 5/8 inch, therefore their incremental increases are going to be this percentage.
so on our rate structure, the first thing I do is make it equivalent meter size. At this point, 5/8 inch meter based on counts, the utility billing clerk gives me counts at the end of every year on our rates. That's how I track how we've grown in users. So 5/8 inch meter and multifamily and multi-unit, which is equivalent to 5/8 inch meter, there's 5,800 equivalent per meter sizes. So that is, hold on, let me do some quick math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is probably nearly 90% of our users.
And obviously, I think
And
you know
that's
where
why I
I'm-
use that as an example, because that resonates with 95% of our users. We have, we don't have any we have zero equivalent of 6-inch meter. We only have 28 4-inch meter, so 90, and that's just my quick math, it could be 94, but.
And obviously, I think you know where I'm leading with this, is we can average out all these changes for all the different meter size, or et cetera, et cetera. I just wanted to just basically get some number out there to give the general public to say, these rate increases we're proposing, really 90% of the residences, this is the rate structure they're going to see. Yes, there are the other 10%, but once again, 90%, this is the incremental rate increase you're going to see. And I think that's something that's been lost in all these discussions of everybody's all concerned about the rates, but dial that down and how much does that affect people individually? How much does that affect the majority of our citizens?
You have some residents that have the 1-inch if they have big irrigation or swimming pools. You will find some residentials, but from that point up, majority of those are the commercial.
Commercial, correct.
And it is all equivalent. So there is an engineer calculation that was done years ago that I still go by. Based on how much water a 2-inch meter goes through, how many 5/8 is that equivalent to? So I take all our users down to an equivalent, and then they get their prorated amount. So again, Dave can explain to that. It's like, okay, how much water goes through a 1-inch meter, and how is that equivalent to a 5/8? Is that 1.5, 1.25? And that's how I prorate how to charge the other meter size. It's all based equal.
So just go back to the stats. So for 90% or on average, thereabouts, of the citizens in the city of Osage Beach
Or 5/8.
that are in city on a 5/8 inch, basically their rates are going to go from $22.73 to $28.24. Correct?
Which one are you looking at?
On column 1, option number 1,
Okay.
5/8 inch underwater
water?
usage.
$22.73 for a 5/8, up to $28.24 for water.
24. So basically, for 90% of the citizens in Osage Beach, they're going to see a $5 increase per month.
And that's how
For the water.
when I say
For water.
multifamily,
Yeah.
yeah. Like a condo complex may have, I'm gonna throw it out there, 4-inch meter, but they're billed like a multifamily.
Yeah.
So each unit gets the billing of the 5/8.
I'm once
But
again, I'm just-
90-something% of our users are equivalent or at the 5/8.
Yeah, I'm just trying to dial this down to a hard number that we basically can say, look,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot of pushback on the rates increases,
Right.
regardless of which options we go with, but I just want to dial it down to say, yes, rate effects are going to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We have to. I mean, you've already heard all the stats. We have to make the increases, but it seems like there's so much uproar. But I just wanted to dial it down to say, 90% of the residents, I'm sorry, I don't want to say this $5 a month is going to make or break you, but we need to look at it and dial it down to how much is this really affecting our citizens? How much is that increase really affecting them? And yes, $5 is $5, $6 is $6, but we're not doubling their cost per month. We're not
Sewer will be 10.
on average, so basically combined water and sewer usage for every resident in the city of Osage Beach, or 90% at least, we're looking at a overall estimated $15 per month increase on their combined utilities for water and sewer. I just wanted to get a stat out there
Combined water and
to
sewer.
the public.
Yeah, would be 33%, $18.71 a month, if you use 5,000 gallons. Actually, our average apartment or multifamily is a little less than that, but 5,000 for easy math. So if you use less than 5,000 gallons, then it's obviously a little cheaper.
Once again, I'm just looking for a hard number we can get out into the public eye to say,
Right.
on average, everybody's in an uproar about this, but let's dial down some of the numbers. So that's all I had to say.
All right, any other comments or questions? Alderman Hoffman.
Yeah, I got 3 questions, actually. One, I guess they're all to Gina, too, I guess. Is the percentage increase for water and for sewer, the percent increase the same for residents and outside the city?
The increase is the same.
Percentage-wise.
Neither group, whether you're inside or outside, it starts with the same base. The inside users get the benefit of the CIT subsidy, so that's why their rates are cheaper, but the percent jump is equal.
Is equal, okay.
Yes.
And I just kind of noticed this, and I'm just curious. Why is the outside the city water 5 times what inside city, and the sewer is only 2 times as much? Is there a reason for that?
Well, it's all about the expenses of water and sewer. They both have their own respective expense layout. And sewer is also getting more CIT subsidy, but it's also costs more to manage. So when I figure both the rates, they're based on their own expenses needed, based on their own income and the base fee and all that. So they're separate. You can't compare, it'd be comparing apples and oranges.
Okay.
Yep.
My last question is, if the usage tax was to possibly pass the next time that we bring it up, would that change this at all?
Use tax?
Usage tax?
If use tax passes, it is considered a general fund tax. So the only way this would change is if the board would make a decision to further subsidize the water and sewer rates with the general fund, with any, because general fund can go downstream anywhere. These other funds can't go upstream. So if the board would choose, just like general fund subsidizes ambulance, which is its own fund, enterprise fund, the board can choose to subsidize any enterprise fund with any funds they have available. So if you have a use tax, you could identify that specifically for a subsidy for water and sewer if you so choose. Because it wouldn't directly, there would have to be other decision-making beyond that.
Right. I'm just thinking that the usage tax, should it pass, and if we directed those funds to the sewer rather than to the parks, which is what we tried last time, that amount of money coming in is shared by the residents, the out-of-city residents, the part-timers, and the tourists. And I'm just wondering if we were to approach it that way, if that isn't helping our residents a little bit, and maybe it helps us get it passed. Just a thought.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Alderman Ross.
I just have one comment, and that is that if those out in the public are wondering why it is that things are really challenged, it is not only O&M. I mean, in the last year, I'll just call it a year and a half, our sewer capital projection between 25, 26, and 27 is up 400% because of projects that we've identified and think need to be done. And it's up 300% on the water side, okay? So it's not just about O&M and operating costs today, but it's also about trying to figure out how we're gonna pay for this system that right now is, for lack of a better term, stretched. Not only does it need significant more maintenance than we've had in the past, but we've got significant investments that are coming. I watched the O&M go up, but once I saw these cash flows and saw what was going on the capital side, it was like, it's even more overbearing about what challenges we have in trying to maintain the system. That's all I have.
All right. Well, Alderman Rucker.
Gene, I don't want to create lots of work for you,
Well, you got limited time, so.
but, and maybe it's for a future administration to do this, but you mentioned something that has intrigued me in reference to the outside city rates. When was that baseline created? And has that baseline been checked to make sure it's still correct? Because I understand the percentage of increase is applied to the out of city as well as it is to the inside. So I understand that. But the base is there. Now, there's philosophy and probably guidelines on how that outside city limit or city amount is charged. Or we can charge whatever we want.
We can charge
Okay,
whatever.
but it's sometimes somebody, this board approved a method to create that formula. And I'm just wondering if that is still the right way to do it.
Okay, so let me go back. I do have that answer. So back in 2007, between 2006, 2007, we overhauled our rate structure philosophy. We made it more consistent, we made it more equitable, and it was approved by DNR. That philosophy has not changed. There's no reason to change that structure. We streamlined it to meter size. I mean, there was a time where the city treasurer's office was going to count stools, bar stools, and all that stuff. So we did an overhaul. That structure has not changed. At that time, that was our peak of our bond. And so when Alderman Ross is talking about, this increase in infrastructure, we are mirroring this type of increase in infrastructure that we went through from 2003 to 2008. We have seen those same peaks of capital infrastructure investment. However, between 2003 and 2007 and 8, we also took out $7+ million bonds to do that over that time. So we've seen that wave, we've had a few times. So the spread between water and sewer, that percentage spread peaked or was created at our peak of our bond owing. So we were getting subsidies from DNR to pay for that bond, and we were subsidizing all for debt. And so that spread between water and sewer was established. It wasn't necessarily a board decision. I mean, the board accepted the rates. That spread I have not manipulated, because how do you raise up and down water and sewer outside or inside to mirror every swoop of CIT? So that spread has theoretically not changed, give or take a few percentage. That spread, I have not touched that structure. So I've kept the spread, and then it's just about, okay, how does the percent changes now to meet cash flow demand these percents up and down for water and sewer rates?
Okay, well, that makes me feel a lot better, because I just.
To keep it from going up and down.
Too many times, whether it's the ordinances or whatever it is, I see that we just keep doing it the same old way, and we don't revisit the fact that
Spread is not
it
changed.
doesn't need to be changed, and especially since what I hear you say, I don't know that, well, what I understand, DNR even had an opportunity to.
They had to approve our structure, and they did that, and we have not materially changed our structure. Well, we have not materially changed our structure, so there's no need. And we're getting ready to go off DNR rates. So in other words, minus meeting some, poverty percentages, after we don't get SDC subsidy, there's not even really a review process. Minus a few things, not really a review process after that. But our structure's not wrong. It's fair and equitable. The spread from water and sewer, DNR doesn't care what we charge inside and outside. But
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Hoffman.
More knowledge.
I don't know how everyone else feels, but I kind of would like to see the 3-year plan. I like the idea of breaking it out, like 11%, 11%, 11% over 3 years. We're trying to get to 33%. Is that correct, Gina?
well, it's not really trying to get that. That's how this works out. Water, sewer right now is anywhere from 45 to 48, depending on how much you use. Water's anywhere from 19 to 23, depending on what you use. So again, if the option 2 with 2 phases is not enough and you want a 3rd phase,
Well,
it'll be the 1st of June.
The reason I'm thinking is twofold. One, we've talked about the residents a lot, and then 95% of the residents are paying only this much more. But we have a lot of businesses in Osage Beach that are going to be paying more, and I'd like to try and ease their burden a little bit yearly. And secondly, I'd kind of hope that we might get lucky and find some solutions in the next year or 2 years from now, whether it's usage tax or something else, to where maybe the 3rd phase we don't have to raise it. If everyone else is, if no one else is wanting to see that 3rd year, then so be it. But if I had my way, I would like to see the 3rd year.
That's it.
All right, the staff is going to need some direction, and the citizens want to know what we're thinking here too. So let's go. Alderman Rose had her hand up first. So
Yeah, I would just like to have a clarification, because this is pretty complex.
It's a lot of moving parts, yes.
I'm looking at July of '24 for the partial rate increase. Total of water and sewer to be 17% increase, correct? Is that the way I'm reading it?
So are you looking at this sheet?
Mm-hmm.
Far left column?
No, it's.
I'm looking at the partial rate, the middle column.
Okay, the middle column.
Yes.
So,
And
yeah.
then, excuse me, and then I'm looking at the next column over January of next year, the partial rate is only 14% increase. So will we be looking at July of '25, another increase? We don't know yet.
Oh, well, that is July 25. So
I'm sorry?
what those 2 columns are, so Option one is if we increase aggregate 33%, that will meet the cash flow needs and make us in the black. If we want to do a two-phased option, we would, as soon as we could, do the first column. The second column would be active January 1st, 2025. Rate increases beyond that would just have to be through evaluations to be determined.
But obviously, if we do the partial rate increase, it certainly would be less of a burden.
Yeah, if you're doing it in two steps instead all at once, and these dates I wouldn't mess with them too much because it's gonna mess with your cash flow and compounding. Obviously, I put July 1st, and like I said earlier, I think the earliest you would get rates changed is August 1st, which means people's first bills would be in September because of how we bill. So if you push that a month, you could maybe say February 1st.
Yeah,
A month or so is not going to
okay.
affect that.
Thank you.
Alderman Ross.
So I would just say one thing, and that is with businesses especially, their plans and budgets have already been, I would assume, made for the year, okay? And especially the high-end users like the car wash or the hotels. I don't believe that we should do it across three. I think that we need to move faster rather than slower. But at the same time, trying to be reasonable with everybody and giving them some notification of what's coming, not only minimize the current impact, but also a notification of what's coming. So I support option two at this point, and I would make a motion to approve option number two.
This.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though.
This is just a
Discussion
discussion.
only?
There's a discussion item, and,
We're not making a
right,
decision.
this is just
Sorry.
discussion.
I want a
I apologize.
consensus. I want a
But
consensus.
at least we know what Alderman.
Okay, that's my
Ross is-
vote. My vote's
yes, yes.
option two.
We know where you stand now.
Alderman
That's good.
Rucker.
I have a question. I'm glad we didn't have that for a vote, because I have a question before we voted. Gina, if I understand this correctly, narrowing it down, if we choose option one, option two, option three, option four, whatever it is, whichever option we choose, and the further we spread that out, is going to mean the further out before we get to our reserve
Yes.
account. So that's what we as the board have to understand. We've got our reserve that is way down, is down, okay? We need to obviously keep the system running, we need to do all that stuff, but we need to get our reserves back, so if we have another heavy hit, we've got the money there. So if we go to Plan 1, then we're gonna have our reserves ASAP.
Well, you're gonna have more of the reserves.
Well,
It's gonna take a few years.
It's gonna take about 3 or 4 years before we get to them. If we take the second method, then we're going to be another probably year out before, or if we would go through the third method, then we're even going further out. So,
Right.
and I'm not saying which item I'm in favor of, but is that a reasonable assumption that that's gonna be the moving part? Before we get our reserves back to where they need to be, it's gonna keep pushing it further out.
Right. The compounding is less. It's just like anything. Money today is worth more than money tomorrow because you can put in there and start earning interest on it. But I understand like what Alderman Ross, it is a big jump, and that's really the reason I only gave two. One, timing, my time constraint, but the second is like, okay, you're just pushing further back, and I did not want to increase CIT anymore, so.
All right.
Well, Gina,
Alderman
thank you.
Barella, go
Thank you
ahead,
for
yeah.
putting these together. I feel like I would be in favor of like option one, but I feel like the residents and everybody else, option two would be better suited. I don't think I would be probably in favor of a third option, just drawing it out even longer. Things do change, but I mean, there's not businesses in here that didn't increase their rates in 6 years. I mean, I think that's just shame on us for not doing that and keeping, this wouldn't be such a big increase overall, but that's how I feel.
All right. Alderman Osteen, how do you feel about this?
I don't believe we need a third option for all the reasons that have been previously stated by other board members. I'm 50-50 on either option right now. I could be easily swayed either way.
Alderman Morose, how about you?
Option 2, definitely.
All right.
Basically because I'm thinking of, it won't be such a crunch for the residents.
Well, I think you have a direction. Do we have any other comments before we,
Option 2, please.
okay. Do we have any other comments or questions? I think Gina has direction.
Thanks, Gina.
Yes, and thank
Thank
you
you
for
very much,
everybody.
Jim.
And citizens out there, thank you so much. I think you know where the board's headed, and then look for 2 weeks, or not next week, but the following week, check the city's website to see what's on the agenda, but I think you have a pretty good idea as well as we do where we're looking then.
Mayor, if I can add
Yes,
to that
please
to
do.
clarify. So I will get a public notice out next week. The soonest meeting, we could have a first reading along with said public notice or public hearing that we'll be noticing up is the June 20th meeting. I will tell you, I will be in Colorado, so, Mike? But second reading could be July 2nd. Let me think about some active dates if we want to do August, and that's something that maybe could be decided on the bill option. But that, you will see a first reading no sooner than 6/20.
And just for clarification, all this information could be available, but nothing's been decided. But if things go the way it looks like the board is leaning, then that would mean probably a 17% increase somewhere around July or August. So that's where it looks like the board is heading, just for raw numbers. And I think Alderman Osteen pointed out to be about a, $12 or $15 a month increase is what they're probably looking at if that goes that way. So thank you all for being here tonight. I know it was a long meeting. Thank you, board. Thank you, Gina. With all that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Alderman Rucker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morose. Do we need a roll call vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody.
Look at me, I guess 2 hours.
Yeah.